We talk a lot about audiobooks here on the channel, especially from the legal perspective, but what happens when we start to involve more people, more voices, music, and we're creating an audio drama? What paperwork do we need? What do we need to know about the legal side? Let's talk to everybody's favorite IP and entertainment lawyer, Tony, to find out more.
My name is Tony Iliakostas. I'm an adjunct professor of entertainment law and IP at New York Law School, and I have an Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok account called The IP Professor that is dedicated to all things intellectual property.
Tony, we talk about the paperwork that we need for audiobooks and for other contracts inside of the publishing industry, but let's talk a little bit about the paperwork and the contract side of creating a multi-voice audio drama where you have multiple actors representing multiple characters, background music, and it's kind of like a little radio production. So what do we need legally to protect us?
So first off, you're going to need a lot of paper. So contracts. But it's important to kind of highlight the different types of contracts you need in a pretty high level type of production of this nature. So let's kind of get the easy one out of the way. Cam alluded to music contracts. This is a great opportunity for you to verify what kind of music you want to feature in your audiobook. Now, I would say the easiest thing to do is to avoid using commercial music. So if you're into Dua Lipa, if you're into Britney Spears, I'm sorry, they're going to be very expensive for an audiobook. And not to mention the manner in which you're using it in a book may not align with the record label and the publisher. So oftentimes when you send them a request, they may want to see the use of the music in context and they may not jive with it. So it could lead to a denial. So I would say the best bet to use when it comes to music is probably going to be your royalty-free music. There are plenty of websites out there, some great ones that offer membership packages where you can go in, get a package, and would lay out exactly what type of use of the royalty-free music is permitted. So in the case of an audiobook, it would lay out whether or not the price of your membership covers it, or if there's an extra incurred fee. Either way, all of that would be laid out. I would say that that's going to be kind of like the easiest contract to get out. And it's not to say that the other contracts aren't easy, but it's like a one and done affair. You pick your music, you get a license agreement for an audiobook, and you're done and over with. But now, since we're talking about multiple voices involved in an audiobook, so different voice actors voicing different characters, that requires having actor agreement or talent release agreements for each of the voice actors. And usually you want to have all the bells and whistles laid out in those contracts. So first things first, you want to make sure that you clearly define the services that need to be rendered in that contract. So how many weeks do they need to be made available for recording lines? Do they need to make themselves available for any re-records? Do they need to even be a part of the marketing of the audiobook once it's live? What obligations and services must they render as a condition of signing the contract? Obviously, you want to lay out what the consideration is going to be. So how much are they going to be paid for their services? You want to have certain information, other information laid out, like rep and warranty clauses. Essentially, the voice actors representing, warranting that they are basically performing an authentic performance that is not infringing on any existing intellectual property out there, especially any existing copyrights. If there's sort of wiggle room for indemnification clauses, I know that those are they're pretty contested, but in a world where you can have some type of coverage in the event of some type of legal claim arising from a voice actor's performance, at least you would be protected. Now, I would say realistically, dual indemnities are probably going to be the best bet, where both parties indemnify one another for a potential breach of a contract term. So maybe that's the compromise that could be made in those scenarios. And then, your other boilerplate provisions, like what if voice actor A doesn't satisfy their services? Are they going to be automatically sued for breach of contract, or do they have a certain period of time to cure a breach? Do they have 15 days, 30 days, 60 days to potentially cure a breach? Sometimes you want to make it a bit more broad so that it's more favorable to the voice actor versus making it stringent, because they might be less likely to sign the contract. But if you're the kind of person that likes stringent terms, then have at it. And then, of course, governing law is something that would also be governed in those contracts. And you would have this type of talent release agreement for all your voice actors, main characters, secondary characters, even the tertiary characters. Whoever is coming into the recording booth to record their lines would have to agree to these terms. And obviously, there's a lot to it. So I think, choose wisely how many people you're hiring. Make sure that you have the budget for it, of course. This is not something that's necessarily legal. It's just sound business advice that I'm giving here. But all that to say, once you kind of have all of that laid out, then you can go all in and begin the process of recording the audiobook. And, like I said, if let's say you're recording for a period of 8 weeks, make sure that you allot enough time for the actors to record their lines so that in the event that there needs to be any re-records, they have the time on their schedule to come back to the sound booth to re-record their lines if necessary. And then again, if it's up to you as the owner of this audiobook, but if you would want some type of active marketing or promotional push from the voice actors, you would lay out those terms in that contract. And during the marketing of the audiobook, they will play a hand in promoting the audiobook on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever they have a social media platform.
And of course, when it comes to these audio dramas, we also have to take into consideration people like sound engineers and editors and people who are going to be doing the behind the scenes work. So can you speak a little to that?
Yeah, so even then we get into the rental of a studio. If you're bringing in sound engineers who are going to edit the work, are you going to hire them on a work made for hire basis? If you are, make sure you have a work made for hire contract. Do not assume that they understand that they're under the employee of or acting as an employee for a brief period of time. You don't want them to have this perception that they're acting as an independent contractor, because that leads to a whole web of legal complexity. And the law actually seriously frowns upon the lack of contracts when it comes to ascertaining employee relationships between employer and employee. So make sure you have all those contracts laid out, especially when you're dealing with, sound recordings and people who are going to be taking these audio files and editing them. You want to make sure that they're not going to say that the final product is theirs. So having those contracts laid out is super important. And listen, even down to the marketing of the audiobook, if you feel like you don't have the manpower to do it and you hire someone else like a PR agency to help with the promotion of the audiobook, also defining that relationship is going to be important. Are they acting as a work for hire? Are they acting as an independent contractor? Laying it all out and having it in writing is going to be your best friend in a scenario like this, because again, it will clearly delineate what their tasks are and will also define the relationship that they serve between you, the true and copyright owner of this audiobook, and them, the agency, the sound engineer, or whoever is on the other side doing the work for you.
And of course, we also know when it comes to doing all this paperwork, it is incredibly important to make sure you have a lawyer going over this. So you need to make sure that you have hired a lawyer to help you walk through this paperwork. But I can already see the comments coming, Tony. Can we just find templates online and use those?
I'm not going to. All right. So this is an opinion, and I can't be sued for defamation when it comes to opinion. But in my opinion, websites like like LegalZoom, Legal Rocket, whatever other websites that are out there that have templates, those are not going to be the best scenarios or the best websites to use in a scenario like this. Why? They're too one-dimensional. They don't have sort of the flexibility for a lot of people out there when they download this type of contract. Circumstances vary. So there needs to be a world where a contract can be customizable. And sadly, on websites like LegalZoom that have these contract templates out there, they may not be amenable to some type of modification. So frankly, your best bet is going to be working with a lawyer who can help you handcraft the agreement from scratch, or the lawyer may have a template that they have used historically in the past that you can use in a scenario like this. But the reason why a lawyer is going to be helpful is because even if, let's say, they have a template that they've used in the past, but let's say voice actor X says, I don't really like the definition of these terms, and starts redlining the heck out of that contract, who's going to be reviewing that? It's going to have to be the lawyer, and the lawyer would know your best interests at heart, especially being that they represent you, the true and authentic copyright owner of the audiobook. At the end of the day, they would want to make sure that your rights aren't being compromised by the red lines that are being made by voice actor X, or by sound engineer Y, or by marketing agency Z. So making sure that a lawyer is present throughout the entire part of the process is really, really important. And not to mention, a lawyer is going to help you sort of navigate scenarios in the event that there is, again, God forbid, any sort of legal action that arises after the fact, after the publication of the audiobook. You just want to make sure that you're covered on all bases, and a lawyer always, I've said it before, lawyers are meant to be advocates for you, and that they're going to be your best friend. And you just have to be able to find one that aligns with you, your personality, and finding one that you trust is also very, very important. So shop around, go find a publishing lawyer who specializes in the audiobook space. And once you find one, then you can have the peace of mind knowing that, you've picked a lawyer that's going to go about representing you authentically, and you'll be well on your way to having a very successful audiobook with multiple voices featured in it.
And if you have questions on creating audio dramas, go ahead and drop those down below. If you've got questions on the legal side, Tony's coming back for upcoming episodes. And as always, you can reach out to Tony on his social media. Tony, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at the IP Professor. You can check out my entertainment law podcast called Scene. New episodes drop every Friday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Drop your questions on the legal side of the publishing industry and follow along for daily episodes helping you to navigate the world of publishing, from your writing to your publishing to your marketing, to make this your most profitable and stress-free year ever. We'll see you in the upcoming episodes.